Thanks for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm honored to be the first speaker. It's really exciting. It's my first time in Utah and first time at Utah State. I always heard a lot. I mean, I studied at Davis, as you can guess from Sarah's intro, and we're also Aggies, and always heard a lot of good things about Utah State. I come from Iran. Both, the Iranian graduate students before the 1979 revolution of Iran, there were like one big community at Utah State and one big community at UC Davis. Many of them became politicians later on in Iran. You can judge the quality of training at both schools. But anyway, it's great to be here. So today's talk, I hope you don't find it depressing. I'm an academic who has switched places and have done different things. And of course, I've learned a lot of things, and I feel responsible to share those things. And within the scientific communities at universities, I think it's fair to be critical, because we can do much better than what we are currently doing. So I apologize for my negative or hopeless language, but I think I hope to be constructive. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about what I've been doing in modeling and understanding, and later on managing complex human environmental systems or system of systems, and why things seem to be more challenging than what we think. So I have an unusual experience. After moving from the United States to London, I got closer to Iran. I got dragged into more Iran-related work out of passion, no funding from any agency, but I wanted to do things on Iran. I got approached by the Iranian government at some point to go home and serve as the deputy head of Iran's Department of Environment, or which could have made me the deputy vice president of Iran. So all of a sudden I have this opportunity to go and serve at a very high level. All of those things that I was prescribing, I could have thought of implementing, but it was a tough decision to make. First time, probably unprecedented for the Iranians to approach someone from outside who has no political connection, just an academic who has been talking too much about Iran, and asking him to come back. And I decided to take that position for many good reasons. Calculated risk. I knew it would be a hard thing to do. I never could imagine that a few hours later, when I arrive in Tehran, I get arrested. That's how confusing the situation. And compared, I think, to many engineers, I can proudly say that I have a little bit of understanding of the social dimensions, the political dimensions of water management, because I've been doing policy-related work and game theory modeling and behavior modeling. So, but I could never see myself getting arrested and get everything. My accounts got hacked into and so on. And still, there were like battle of forces. Government tried to rescue me, battle of the shadow government, the military government, and the government. So I served for months, for 7 months only. And in this 7 months, I could, I think, learn a lot of things and run a lot of things with people, work with people, run campaigns, fight against plastic, ban the bottled water, lots of things. But I also was learning a lot of things about the complexities of real life. I was the Iranian probably front diplomat in the environmental space at that time. Negotiated for Iran in climate change negotiations. I also served as the vice president of the UN Environment Assembly Bureau. So hanging out with the politicians, and I always was the younger guy in the room. But lots of good things that I learned there. Lots of positive things that I learned. Eventually, I had, after smear campaigns, after the crackdown of environmental activists in Iran, who some of them have been in jail for more than 600 days. One is dead, and lots of smear campaigns against me, arrests, interrogations, and a lot of things. I ended up resigning during a diplomatic trip and never went back to Iran. And I got accused of being a spy, working for Mossad, CIA, MI6, name it, like not KGB, but all the others, and trying to do harm to Iran, limit Iran's development, make Iran food dependent, import GMOs and destroy the Iranians genetically, ratify the Paris Agreement and hurt Iran's development path. I was called a bioterrorist. I was called a water terrorist, and a lot of those things are still going on. But what I learned on the positive side, I'm alive and I'm free now. Don't have enough freedom that I deserve and I want, but some freedom is out there, and I can look back and say this was the best sabbatical an academic can wish for. But I learned a lot. I learned, yes, 2 plus 2 can be greater than 4. Where when Aristotle said this, I think it meant something positive, but I think in our world this is a negative thing. We learn a lot of things in science, in academia. We water engineers learn, for example, water always flows from a higher level to a lower level. We learn that we don't do anything which is not economically justified in economics. And when you combine these things with politics, we pump water uphill, we take it anywhere. So there are things which are not economically justified. There are things which are not, even it doesn't make sense engineering in some cases, but you do it. So when you model a part of the system, when you study one part of the system, you might miss this reality and get surprised. Things can get out of control, and now we are even attributing wars and migrations and lots of things to lack of water, climate change, and lots of other things, which I also have problems with because, again, we like jargon, we like making headlines and saying crazy things, but those things get a lot of attention. So the main conclusion is this, and now, okay, what can we do about it? What I have been doing about it, and so on. Now, on the positive side is that our computational capacity has increased tremendously. Now we can model, compute almost anything that what we can accomplish over a week during grad studies is something that I think generations before us couldn't even dream getting done in 4 or 5 years when it comes to modeling and computation. So we have this capacity, and now we are seeing, left and right, all these applications of AI and data mining and big models of the Earth and the whole world, and these colorful maps that get published in Nature and Science, and with the help of this. But the question is that is better computation means better understanding. If we can measure something, if you have more data, does it mean that we understand these systems? And what if our understanding is not correct? What if the first time that we model something we didn't get wrong? We make judgments based on these things. And all the previous industrial revolutions have led to problems and unintended consequences that we are dealing with. So, Industrial Revolution 1, 2, 3. Now we're in Industrial Revolution 4. So why not this revolution having unintended consequences that we cannot figure out and we don't understand? So one of the problems that I have with what we are doing and the way we get trained and the way we train people and the way that we engineers solve problems is through what we call linear thinking. And I think this is one of the most problematic things in solving human nature problems. So we see a problem, right? Whether climate change, water shortage, this and that. And we have our desired situation in mind. I need more water. I want to stop greenhouse gas emissions and so on. And that defines our problem. Then we go and invent a solution, say water transfer, build a dam here, reduce carbon emissions through biofuels and so on. So that results in alteration of environment, and that gives us our outcome. And that's how we have been solving problems, and we continue doing. The way this is the way we are still solving the problems. What this doesn't do, in the way that we think, in linear thinking, we don't think about the feedback within the possible feedbacks within the systems and the unintended consequences, right? If I'm solving global warming problem with biofuels, what if I'm using more water for food, fuel production? And now, what if the next generation has water shortage problems? What if I transfer water from one location to another and cause unintended consequences? What if I build a dam here and increase water supply, but in the meantime, I increase water demand and so on? So this is the part that we are missing. So with some friends, we have been working on non-linear thinking and how to do things differently and what the impacts are. One example of this is something I've been working on, a problem in Iran, a basin in Iran that I tried to model at some point, and later on we work more on this problem. Former capital of Iran, Isfahan, and central Iran, located in a dry zone. It is it has a high population. It has high urban water demand, agricultural water demand, and industrial water demand, and this is industrialized. Has seen a huge growth of population, and the way we have supported this capital, former capital, the growth of this capital, this powerful city and region, or this basin, is through water transfer, because it couldn't afford surviving on its own or growing on its own water resources. Say, similar to Southern California, right? You have people who want to live somewhere for any reason, and now they are water short, so you bring water from elsewhere. So, this is also a tourist attraction in a city which has its identity tied to a river which is flowing through this city. And this is how this city looks like. Even though through water transfer, we have more than doubled the natural flow of the river. So that's what we have done. Still, this is the scene that we see most of the year. Yeah, now this year we have had huge floods. This scene is a little different, fortunately, but this is what you see. And imagine that, say London without Thames. If a city which has its identity tied to water loses its water, what happens to it? This is the basin. So as I said, relying on different water transfer projects, and we still keep implementing more and more. They become water short, we keep transferring more water. Still, we grow a lot of things. In this dry area, we grow rice because people just like the Iranian rice better than the Pakistani rice or Indian rice or Thai rice. So they like that, even though it's water short, even though they're transferring water, they're putting like 90% of the water into the agricultural sector at the expense of things happening elsewhere. So we are having conflicts in over water transfer. Now people in the donor basin are aware of this. They think they need the water for themselves. They need to grow, and there are lots of conflicts. Actually, yesterday it was all over the news that some people who were involved in a conflict a few years ago now have to, their penalties came out, their charges came out. So this has caused problems in different locations, in a donor basin, in another basin downstream of the donor basin, and I'm sorry, in another province downstream of the headwaters, which is in another basin. So in another province. So a number of provinces have got involved in this conflict, which has been caused by water transfer. So we modeled this, and like any engineer, we developed a hydrologic model, or hydrogeologic model, let's say groundwater, surface water connections. And just to tell you that I'm smart, it's like differential equations are there, right? And everything. So like any other thing. But I came to a point that I had to estimate like water demand, domestic water demand, agricultural water demand, and industrial water demand. Fortunately, at a time, I had not taken enough economic courses, so I didn't go with the supply and demand thing or willingness to pay type of work. So I started thinking about like what determines demand. Water engineering, how do we do that? They give us a scenario. Business as usual, high demand, low demand, that's what we do. But what determines the dynamics of demand growth? And that was the question. And then thinking about this, so we made another subsystem looking at how demand is growing in this region, comparing it to the neighboring region, looking at the how attractive the region becomes when you take more water into it, when you create the perception of water availability, when you promote growth in the area, and how water demand grows when you supply things, and looking at different things which leads to the increase in the agricultural and industrial and urban demand. So also some estimation later on how agricultural demand is determined and how farmers switch between crops based on the signals they get from the market in the previous round. And so a big model is, now I have a big model, which then I calibrate and satisfy myself that it shows a reasonable behavior, and then I run the model so I can publish papers and graduate students, right? And so this is what we do. We run it under different scenarios. But now talking to the public, talking to the policymakers would not be possible with this sort of thing. Something that I am proud of in building narratives in Iran is to work on this and say, what we learned from this whole modeling exercise, from all these efforts, we got like a few graphs and figures that we can show to the public and convince them, and tell them a story and build a narrative about what's wrong in this system. So the first time I modeled, I swear that I didn't know what the result would look like, but I saw that as a result of water transfer, we see more shortages. We see increasing shortages. So shortage drops for a while, and then you see, again, increase in water demand and water shortage. And the question was, why? And after that modeling exercise, we got back to simplifying all those loops and causal loops and ended up with something that can be explained to people, can be explained to the policymaker. The way we think in linear thinking is that I see water scarcity as a problem, and what am I going to do about it? I transfer water to this basin, I increase water supply, and that solves our problem. True, that's how we do it. And engineers are good with this sort of problem solving. What we have not paid attention to is increased water supply promotes water development in a region which might not be, would not have the natural capacity for that sort of development, carrying capacity for that sort of development. That increases water demand. You create more jobs, you expand the urban areas and so on, and that increases your water scarcity. So this is, another reinforcing loop that I did not see when I designed my balancing loop. In management science, this is called a fix that backfires. It's like, you have a pain in your body, or you have a headache from an infection, but you take a painkiller. Tylenol takes your pain away, but your infection is there. You take another painkiller in a few hours, it keeps coming back. Your infection gets worse and worse, but you're trying to cure the symptom and cure. And then eventually your body might collapse. So then you get stuck into a symptom management paradigm, because you can't really solve problems proactively. You get into a reactive mode and address the problem you have. Look at California. Southern California has grown. You cannot ask people to move out. They want water, they need water, and the population keeps increasing. You cannot really stop the water transfer into that region. But then you have battles of forces, right? Battles between the environmentalists, Central Valley farmers, and Southern California, right? So you get stuck into this sort of problem. But now this is one sort of archetype or a system that we have seen in socio-hydrologic system or say human water systems, but there are other structures that we have also worked on that we have seen similar things, that there are feedbacks that we never saw, and these feedbacks can make our problem worse. So if we want to replace our linear thinking with nonlinear thinking, when we design our solution and make decision, we also try to figure out what the possible unintended consequences might be. Now, they are unintended, so by definition, they might be very hard to predict, And for sure, we will, our smart solutions today will have a lot of unintended consequences in the future. The question is whether I can think twice and change my solution, whether I can implement things which are not irreversible, right? Once I build a dam, it's really hard to get rid of it immediately, right? You alter the environment and a lot of damages. You alter the landscape and even development, human developments and urban development, and then things are very hard to change afterwards. So this is the part that we are interested in and we have to pay attention to. Now, in this environment, when we think this way, yes, we might not be able to guess all the unintended consequences, but we question who says that the water demand should grow like this. If you look at IPCC scenarios and how we project climate change and things like this. So when it comes to development rate, we make assumptions. We never talk about the development rate, which can get limited by increased climate change or climatic changes or pressure on natural resources and so on. So when it comes to those things, we assume they are external to our system, right? So the point is, how do we internalize the externalities? And then can we solve one problem without creating new problems in this environment? And within this way of thinking, there are things that we also need to appreciate. And one of the things is when it comes to concepts like sustainable development, integrated management, all these buzzwords that we like, resilience, SDGs, and all these things that every now and then we just rebrand and rename and get busy with for a few years. There's no clear definition. There's no fixed coordinates. We cannot really figure out what is the definition of sustainability. What is sustainable, right? Because our expectations are changing, our understanding of the system is changing, our systems are changing themselves, right? So these definitions keep changing. So there is no way that you can come up with a magic index which can tell you if a system is sustainable or not. World Resources Institute a few weeks ago released a ranking of water stress around the world, made to the front page of New York Times. If you look at the ranking, the countries which don't have problems, a lot of African countries are there. But I think a lot of African people are dreaming of being pushed up in the ranking, but have a better lifestyle or being empowered and being able to use their natural resources. This index simply shows the physical limit in my system. It doesn't show what that part of the world is suffering from, which is economic water shortage, right? Lack of enough resources to afford building infrastructure and putting the available water into use, right? Whereas you see some countries in the top ranking, which you believe they're like to be really good. For example, Israel is the number 2 in that ranking in terms of how bad the situation is. Now, if you understand the dynamics of water management, you immediately ignore these things, but they get into the media, they get a lot of attention, but we simply try to use one index to say how the world looks like. It's like if you come to me and I check your cholesterol and say you have no problem, and don't ask you what your life habits are, what you eat, or how things have changed in your life, your lifestyle, and so on. By looking at your cholesterol, I make a judgment about your health, right? It's not going to work like that. So abstract indexes will not work. We are dealing with human water systems, which are very complex. They're like, you try to tweak one part of the system and you create problems elsewhere. Why? We are dealing with systems where we don't understand them. It's, bounded rationality is always problematic. You cannot figure out everything and you cannot handle more than a few criteria and objectives. The causal relationship within these systems are very hard to understand. Uncertainty is part of these problems. Emerging behavior is there, and you have non-stationarity. Things are evolving, right? But this system is pretty complex. Now, what I learned in real world is that this system is a tiny part of a larger system, right? Even though that system is very complex for me to understand as a water person, still this is part of a very, a much larger system, which is called a human environmental system of systems, if you want to call it. Now, those of us who are now excited about water, food, energy nexus, right? Talk about water, food, energy, environment, and we hang out somewhere around these circles. But the real world has its economic sector, employment, public infrastructure, health, defense, foreign policy, and so on. So if I'm now a policymaker, how do I navigate here? How do I make decisions? How do I prioritize actions and decisions? Unfortunately, in this world, foreign policy, economy, employment, housing, health are far more important for any politician than the environment, even for most of the general public. This is something I used to explain, like how in public policy we set priorities, right? For something to get your attention, to take an immediate action on, it needs to be both urgent and important. Both urgent and important. Where's water in this world? Water, even in terms of importance, compared to other things, it's, I hope it gets to the right, but it's somewhere there compared to many other things. But its urgency is not high. I'm a vote seeker. I want to get reelected. Tell me if the state of water in this country determines the behavior of the voters, or which one is more influential, the stock market or the situation of water, the water quality or environment, state of the environment, or housing and loans and things like that, employment or climate change, right? So the problem is that in order to get attention to water and move it up there, we need extreme events. So extreme events, when they come in, then the political cost of reforms drop. That's the window of opportunity. Everyone is talking about, say, climate change or extreme, this extreme event and water shortage and this big drought that is happening. And then you can't pass laws. Like California, during the long drought, they passed laws about groundwater monitoring. You get surprised when you tell people from different parts of the world that California was not metering their groundwater. It's surprising. But the political cost of having that rule and setting was high. 25% reduction in Southern California in urban water use. That comes during a big drought, when the political cost of reforms drop. Now, in this situation, you become, again, reactive. Nothing is done proactively. So you need a crisis to then take an action, which is very sad because we rely on nature and failures. Now, if you are in the United States, you might afford a big fire. You might afford a big drought. But if you're in Syria, you might not afford a big drought. If you're in Afghanistan, you might not afford a big drought. So the resilience of your economy determines if an extreme can be useful to your system or not. So in the short term, you have some cost, but then there's a window of opportunity to take action. So now another thing is when I serve on government, then I develop sympathy for the decision makers, right? Because I have tons of problems in the environmental sector. I have a limited time, and I have all these, even environmentalists who are fighting with each other over which problem is the most important problem that we need to deal with, right? So then, what I could see was one academic who comes into my office and wants to lecture and tell me that, so slides with tons of slides, and I'm so busy trying to do things, and they think I'm emotional, I'm not paying attention to what's logical, and same thing for me. I think you're not getting it, you don't understand the reality, you don't understand the complexity, and this view is there. I think each side thinks the other side is not rational, is not logical, right? And a few years ago, I get this talk for an award that I was getting at EGU that, we keep blaming each other We think they don't understand, and they think we don't understand. They think we're just like modelers who don't understand the reality, and we think they're short-sighted. They don't understand the complexities, and what they're doing is not right. Is not right. So the problem with this sort of judgment is the situation that I also face, right? I thought I had good solutions for Iran, but then the Iranian Revolutionary Guards thought these are garbage, and I'm like, CIA and Mossad are telling me what to do. So this sort of, because narratives are not formed and this understanding doesn't exist, we don't understand, we don't communicate properly, and that's when that sort of understanding is not there, then we cannot make a decision. Another thing that I have been working on is through game theory is this distinction between what is good for the system, what is optimal for the system, what is optimal for the world, with what is possible, what is feasible, what can be done. And then that has taken me to the definition of stability versus optimality. What is optimal? It's optimal for the whole world to stop climate change tomorrow, to keep, the warming at this level and not go further. It's optimal for the United States to protect its environment. It's optimal for Brazil to stop the fires and so on, right? But what is optimal is not necessarily something that can be implemented. And in our search for what is optimal and what is best for the system, we might lose opportunities of implementing small and incremental improvements. A lot of times, actually, even the environmentalists block a lot of incremental improvements. Oh, banning a straw doesn't make a difference. Go make fun of yourself, like, bottle water ban. Is that going to help our environment? Go fight with the polluters. Go do this, go do that. And reminding people or telling people or creating this belief that small things won't matter in the society, and we have to get these things implemented, and we have to fight, like even 1.5 degrees or 2 degrees. Everyone is negotiating it there. No one is talking about the means of stopping climate change. What are the means of climate? We can go on strike every day. We can go in front of camera every day and complain about this problem. But how do we solve this problem? And this is something that in many cases, when we do computations, when we calculate what is optimal, what is Pareto optimal, what is good for the system, we don't see. So stable versus optimal, and we have done with a group of people a lot of work on this thing, that is the optimal solution reachable? That thing that you are saying. I know David Rosenberg here was also working on near optimal solutions. That we are so focused on that optimal that we miss a lot of other opportunities out there, and just our push for that optimal might prevent us from getting small things done, and we lose a chance of getting smaller things done and making incremental improvements. So how do we get to the desired solution? What is the evolution? What is the path? So that's another thing that we don't talk about. And then in other systems, for example, in the developing world, things become harder when people don't trust their government, and when they have a hard time understanding that complex system. Everything is like, having an effect on another thing. Then you cannot explain it. Even the scientists cannot explain it. Then the narratives are formed. People just see the symptoms, environmental degradation. Then you look for conspiracy theories, right? Who's causing it? The United States? Our enemies? Our bad government? And then these beliefs are formed, and then, it's a governance problem. Okay, yeah, everything is a governance problem. Then they say the belief is, now, if this government is gone, Iran would be Switzerland overnight. Because they forget, what are the causes? What are these things that must be done? Maybe in my opinion, and I talk about it tomorrow, but Iran's environmental and water problems are related to its economy, its social economy, its political economy. And that's true across the Middle East, except for Israel, which has had a different development path and history, and it's very different. The rest of them have they haven't been able to decouple their economy from water and natural resources. And now, of course, they face trouble. And you cannot just turn them into a different country overnight. Otherwise, everyone knows it's good to be Sweden or Norway, but you can't get there, right? So then the question is, like I also a lot of times face that, for example, in another country, like in Oman, where we're working on groundwater drawdown by the coast and saltwater intrusion, then we look into the problem, we develop our model, we even suggest smart meters to be implemented that you can control things remotely and cut their electricity and do this and do that and even calculate how much they need to pump, this, that. At the end of the day, I need a politician who wants to implement that, and no politician wants to do that. Let people pump. Let people pump, because I don't want to mess with people. Because the same people who are complaining about the saltwater intrusion would kick me out of office or go on a strike if I mess with them, right? You cannot play much with energy prices in France. How can you do that in the developing world? What happens? No politician does it. Everyone knows, even including the people who go out and are mad at you, know that it's good for air pollution, it's good for global warming, it's good for them to cut to subsidies and so on. So then it's easy for me to do these calculations, but implementation is always something that I'm struggling with. So how do I get this thing done? And if I want to solve this problem, what sort of other problems I create by doing this? So can I reach this optimal that I'm suggesting? I think this is our responsibility to also talk about, yes, desired state, current situation, but how do we get there from this? Because people are tired of us telling them the end of the world is coming, right? Of course, part of our job is alerting and telling them, but if you go to a doctor and the doctor tells you that your situation is horrible and and you will die soon, you would ask for a solution, right? You would ask for something to be done. And that's how you develop hope and do something and make a movement. Those who lose hope, they're done. And in the environmental space, if you lose hope, then you're done early. So this word of modeling, I think one thing we have to do is to get rid of this assumption about group rationality, that we are the world that we care about the common goods and we want to do everything together and save the planet. That's true. It's good to get there. But honestly, when you vote for your country, you don't think about what's good for the country as a whole, what's good for the GDP. You have your personal interests. You care about the promises they're making. You have self-interest, and those things matter. When you model these systems, you put everything, you aggregate all these objectives, and make a multi-objective model, and you run and think that is good. And forget all the complexities, right? I don't know if you saw, an American professor had written a piece in The Guardian, I think it was last week, about foreign intervention in Brazil because of the fires, because of the wildfires, and even putting people under sanctions, and then also, there is an option of military intervention. If you want to do that, do it in Washington, D.C., because climate change, who's responsible for climate change, right? There is a wildfire. It's a serious thing, and Amazon matters to us, but taking advantage of these opportunities to attack other, take over countries and doing so it's not a fair game. And these complexities must be understood. If the Brazilians are rejecting the funds, they have a reason. And unless you try to understand them, you're not going to be helpful and constructive. In our models, we assume that everyone is cooperating. Everyone is trying to help. Whereas and when we model our thing, the inherent assumption is that there is a God who's fair to the system and can tell everyone what to do and what is fair and what is good for them, and they would do it. But they don't. We have done a lot of things comparing stability definitions with optimality definitions, operations research results, and economic methods versus some other game theory methods to show that what is the most optimal is actually the least stable, and you cannot get it done. And my point is that every bad decision has a good reason. We have to try to figure out why people make bad decisions. But bad decision to us might not be bad to them. All of us have our own utility functions and way of thinking and values and so on. So I think both of these people are rational, but in their own way. You might pick to be on one side, and hopefully all of you are on the left. But so both of them have a reward system. One tries to save lives to feel good, and the other one tries to kill people to feel good. right? And all politicians have good reasons for their bad behavior. You can't make fun of them, but they have their methods that work for them. Trump's Twitter strategy works. No matter if you like it or not, he's communicating with the general public, with those who need to be heard, and people comment on what he says and reply to his comments and think they're like communicating to the President of the United States. Then the issue is when it comes to the environment, there is no immediate impact. This is a very important thing. You fix something, there is no immediate impact. So politicians need rewards for making a behavioral change, for making a reform, but the impact would be seen in a few years. A bad decision also would not have immediate impacts. But the other thing in the environmental space is to change the current situation. We have to do trades. We have to give up on something. The problem is that we talk about processes, getting people engaged. We were discussing this earlier today. Getting people engaged, bringing people to the table, taking photos with the politicians. And I was not long ago one of them. Taking photos is easy. Saying big, ambitious things which get make the headlines is easy. Let's solve the dust storm problems in the whole Middle East. Yes, and take some photos. But how do you do that? What is the substance to trade? Climate change problems can be solved, yes. Who would pay for it? We still don't know. Who should pay for it? We still don't know. How do we calculate who's guilty? We know who's responsible. Population, based on historical responsibility, based on oil reserves. We still don't know. So the substance to trade is not our focus. We don't say. And environment, unfortunately, doesn't have anything to offer most of the time. I mean, even cannot afford paying money to do a trade. So we need to also think about the substance to trade, what to give to the other party to make it a win-win deal. And a lot of times the win-win deal is not going to be within the system that you're studying. So if you are putting arbitrary boundaries around your system, you're looking at your own watershed or your own country or your water system only and forget the fish, so then you're an hydropower operator, you're fighting with the environmentalists, and they want more flows and you don't want to release more flows. As long as you're bargaining over cubic meters of water, it's a zero-sum game. But you have to change this game and take it out of the water game. Now we talk about nexus, that's a good possibility, right? So when you link oil and water and link energy, water and food, then the situation might be different from the past, but sometimes it's also trust, diplomacy, and lots of other things that you can link. And in the interconnected world, those things matter. Yes, we can sit down and do a calculation of virtual water flows around the world and say water should go from water-rich regions to the water-short regions, but the reality is not that way. Markets still decide about what to do. California's agriculture has a huge impact on the whole world, how the prices are set, and it's not a fair world. It's not a fair world. We can complain about this or do nothing, and we can talk about our ideals, and that's a good thing to set ambitious targets, but we also have to get things done on the ground. So once you get into this, we understand the linkages, then you are willing to lose in one game and gain in the other game. And that's what I call a strategic loss. I'm strategically losing in this particular game, in the NAFTA game, because I won that one. I'm strategically firing Bolton, maybe, to get a deal with a country. I'm strategically, falling back on the number of centrifuges that I am having to, get some sanctions lifted or by Airbus if I'm in Iran. So the strategic loss is a big deal, and identifying these things is another thing that we can be really, I think, something that can be our great contribution. The other thing within natural systems is their evolving structure that a lot of times we miss. When we model these systems, we have stationary assumptions, right? And even our solutions are stationary. One of the main reasons for failing, for not being able to come up with a solution for climate change is that climate change is a problem of a modern world, is a new problem. But the institutions we're trying to solve the new problem with are stationary. They're old institutions. We still try to justify economically justify solutions to climate change. And we're not asking why we should economically justify that action. But there is legacy. Those legacies must be understood. The way you have set up your institutions, beliefs, and so on. And so our problems are evolving, or the way of our thinking is not evolving. And when it comes to natural resources, this is very important because the state of the system continuously changes. The problem is that we don't know where the tipping point is. If we know when the clashes are coming, when we will fail, then we take actions. Even in game theory, sometimes we say, you flip, if parties are not coming to a consensus, just say, I'm going to flip the coin and pick the winner. In that case, under a common threat, they might make a decision. In case of climate change, do we have can we predict when the end of the world is coming? And those of us who are risking that and saying we only have till 2025, what if we get to 2025 and we're still not dead? Would people listen to us anymore? If you are, just rebranding things, climate change, now climate crisis, emergency, climate catastrophe, disaster and all that, the end of the world is coming. What if it doesn't come? People would not lose, and the scientific community will lose their trust that people have and their credibility. So this evolving structure, once you pay attention to it, you realize that a lot of decisions that are being made by the politicians, by the farmers who are using a common resource, are rational, are justified. If the inflation is high, which is the case in many developing countries, pumping water out of the ground today is better than tomorrow, and you should take out as much as you can because you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. You don't even know it, so for the Iranians 2 years ago, it was, we signed a new deal with the rest of the world. Now we're part of the big economy. We can interact. And then there's an election in another country. Some people mess it up and then someone pulls out of the deal and all of a sudden we're fighting again. We are having the worst sanctions ever. So if you're in that situation, can I come and tell you, let's think about climate change in 2050s? Or shall I tell you this and that and air pollution? Would you care about the dust storms and air pollution and sanctions and lack of food and embargoes and things like that? Or employment, recession, exchange rates? Or things which are of long term? So then the issue of narratives matter. The way we build narratives, the way we fight over narratives. I saw a lot of these things in the environmental war, that people were fighting over who is the Ayatollah of the environment, who's the leader, who's the king, who sets the story, right? People are saying the same thing, but they want their narrative to be there. And the same, even the fights between groups over the same thing. The other thing which I learned, I think, is totally different from my perception. I confess that I discounted the significance of society in the science policy interface. Right? I was one of those who was putting things in my 10-year package and promotion package that I got invited by this parliament member or this minister or that minister, and those are the things which I was proud of. I never reported my lecture for the 6th graders on sustainability, which is by far the hardest lecture I've given. So once I sat in office, I realized that I cannot even implement a lot of those good things that I thought would be good because the public are not sold on it, right? Because I always went to the politician. The politician, in the best cases, he has a nice gesture. He listens to me. He takes some notes, this minister, that minister. He continues doing what is business as usual. And once he invites me, then I shut up because I feel the guy has respect for me, right? And then the people who need to buy the narrative, who need to put pressure on the politicians are not there. You either have to reward them or put pressure on them for changing their behavior, to set their expectations. And the problem is that to have politicians who care about the environment, it's a chicken and egg problem. To have politicians who care about the environment, you have to have a society which cares about the environment. To have a society which cares about the environment, you need politicians who do things on environmental education. So you need to start somewhere. And I think the pressure, if it's coming from the public, then the expectations would change. Otherwise, we're just chit-chatting. So, I think the most important messages of this talk is, first of all, complexities are there. The summation of our studies would not, help us understand the whole complex system. Right? You cannot have the best, car design, like components of car, designers of the components of cars, and put them in different rooms and say, go build your best engine and make your best, transmission system and so on. And I assemble these and this would be a best car. So as long as I'm studying my water part and you're studying your fish part and we think we combine these, we're not going to get anywhere. And as long as we just get together to do something because NSF wants us to do so, we're not going to get anyway either. So understanding this complexity and that we can, we should be responsible. We should make sure that we do not make irreversible moves. We do not solve one problem and create new problems. The fact that water or environment or whatever you're working on is a tiny piece of that complex system of systems. And if you want something to be done, you have to respect the complexities which are out there. You have to have stories. You have to sell narratives. You have to talk about substance. And that thing that you're selling should be achievable. Otherwise, you keep talking about the great future and what needs to be achieved. And you develop a gap between yourself and the politicians and even the general public who you think are stupid and they don't get it and they don't understand it. And later on, they read my papers and understand I was right. It's not going to get anywhere. And I think I should thank my students for all of these. And I have been in different places around the world. And I've worked with a lot of good people and have learned a lot. And I appreciate their work and efforts. Thank you.